Larry, over to you.
All right, guys. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for taking some time. We're going to go over the 8.7 release today. A couple things about this release. There's a couple big things. One is the updated Elan internal player. Number two is the HHR direct communication mode, and we'll talk about all these specifically. Third is a new subsystem. We haven't had a new subsystem since Intercom came out a couple of years ago. So that's new. We'll talk about that. Then we'll talk about the generic features and enhancements that we do in every release, then drivers specifically, and some CERs and ending comments there. So I'm your host, Larry Cramp. That's the handsome gentleman over to the left there. And Jeff Kaplinski is the other guy on that image. So here we go. The first thing we'll talk about is Elan Player, the Elan internal player. There hasn't been anything new on this in a long time. So now we do. Now this is only updated specifically with the SC100 and 300. But you can see what we did with the image. That's our new UI. We call it the visualizer. That's only for the Elan internal player. It gives you a static display of what's going on with the music. We also added Bluetooth. Now we'll get into that specifically, but that does require an ITP. That's where the Bluetooth antenna lies. And we now support local music, and that was always kind of there, but we support it now via USB or NAS. And remember, with the storage manager we added in the last release, that's how you add the drives, both NAS or USB. So we'll talk about local music first. Again, NAS or USB supports 5,000 files, MP3, WAV, M4A. We could sort by artist, album, or track. There's playlist support and queue support. There's a couple images there, what that looks like. To set this up with a NAS, you would just enter the NAS using Storage Manager. You would enter the NAS information, the IP address, and then the folder name. Then tell us if it's for this, you'd add music, but if you had photos, you would do that too. This has only been tested with a single partition drive. And then you scan the drive and hit add music, and that's how you scan it, and that's how it adds the music. If you do add more music, you'll have to rescan the drive so we can get the new stuff. USB is the same thing, only you're using a USB port. Again, that's done through Storage Manager. Now, you might be out of USB ports, and remember the SC300 or SC100 only has one. The SC300 has two. So if you need more USB ports, you can use a USB bridge to get some more.
Larry, if I could chime in for a second.
You may.
We added the storage manager in the last build, and countless calls myself and the RTS team have received on. Everything has been moved over to the viewer on this now. So the storage manager is nested in the viewer settings. Traditionally, remember, we had to go back into the content, map the drive, and read the drive, and you get all that info there. That is not how we're doing it any longer with this. Just so you guys know that everything has been moved over to the viewer under that storage manager setting.
Thank you, Jeff.
Back to you, Larry.
Bluetooth. So there's a couple things to keep in mind with this. The Bluetooth radio is in the ITP itself. But the Bluetooth, the audio comes out of the Elan internal player, which is out of the controller, out of the audio outputs out of the controller. So I have some images that'll kind of show it down a little bit easier. But so an ITP is required, and that is where the Bluetooth derives from, because that's in the room locally. So that is better for location and distance and all that stuff. So each Bluetooth radio, so each Bluetooth or ITP can support 3 simultaneously connected devices. Of course, only one's going to play at a time. But the way we did it is you can have 3 people connected, and then you could pretty much switch on the fly of who's playing what. And that, when you have a group setting, that does actually make it pretty easy and pretty convenient as well. So a device will play when it's connected. You can switch quickly between the players. And if you switch between different connected devices, then the other one will pause. So that is, you can't have multiple playing at the same time. So you have to pair the device, so the phones or whatever, to each ITP. Now you can do that via the interface, source interface, or you can do it through the settings page. Sorry. So yeah, there's multiple different ways to pair them. But if you have multiple ITPs, which I think is the case, you have to pair each your phone or tablet or whatever to each one of those. So you can have a phone, like a kid's phone, that is only paired to an ITP specifically and not others. So you can do that, and that's all configurable. Extenders are also supported. So if you require streaming more than one Bluetooth source at a time, you can do that via an extender player. So remember the extender, SC100, SC300, and then you get that extra player. Now I think images are worth 1,000. So I've made some images. In each of these 3 rooms, there's an ITP, there's speakers, and there's devices connected, right? So only one, since I only have one Elan Player coming from in this particular picture, the SC300, so it's only one. It's going to allow one of those at a time. So I could take audio from one ITP and pump it through and play it in any zone that I want, but I can't play them all at the same time. See, if I use this one, I can't play from the other ones. And then if I want to, and if I need to do that, I can. So if I added another player, in this case I had an SC100, I can now use that audio output as another source, and I can now play 2 at the same time. So there is a new setting. Now these are under the advanced settings. It's called Bluetooth, obviously. And what you'll see is each ITP that you have, and you'll see them there. And what's kind of cool is once you click on one, it'll show you which devices are already paired to that one. So this is my literally office ITP, and those are my 2 devices that I have paired. No other devices I have paired to that specific one because I'm the only one ever in here. Now we get into some other things. So device connect action. So this is going to define what happens when a device connects. So connecting a phone to the panel requires you to go into your phone and just hit connect to device. So that is an actionable item. So you could say what you want to happen, no action. So that's the default. It doesn't do anything. You connect to it, the phone will connect, and it won't do anything. Route if zone is inactive. So what this will do is if the zone that the ITP is connected to as the default, and that's a drop down in the configurator. If that zone is off, what will happen is it'll automatically connect, turn the zone on to the internal player, the Elan internal player, EIP, and then it will start to play automatically. Route always. So what route always will do is the same thing as if zone inactive, but it'll actually do it if the zone is on too. So if you always want the Bluetooth to take over, then that's what you would pick. So 3 options, and this is by the ITP. So whatever, then you could have it different. So the office could be route always versus the kitchen, which would be route zone is active, or whatever the case is, specific to the touch panel.
Yeah, Larry, let me interrupt again. Guys, think of this as like, how we're configuring door station dial plans, right? Where we've got the, power management and volume management buttons. So that if the zone is inactive, that's the only time it's going to play. So if someone does have something playing in the kitchen, and kitchen is included in this Bluetooth zone setup, it's obviously not going to play because that zone's currently inactive. So basically, this just prevents us from interrupting other people or other sources that are active in other zones at one specific time. Similar to how we do our door station dial plans, it's just worded a little different.
Thank you, Jeffrey. Output device. It's a couple options here. Auto, which is the default, and then you can select a specific Elan internal player. And again, this is only if you have extenders, so you have more than one player, but you can say, so the output device in this case, the Office ITP, is going to, I could say, use the SC300 or SC100 or a specific player indeed, or auto. And what auto will do is use an unused player. It's the easiest thing, and it's I think it's a very good option. But sometimes you might want to use a specific player, and that is okay too. We give you the option there. Let's see. Next one is selecting the actual player. like I had said, you could pick the an internal or extender player to always use from that touch panel. So it is specific to which Bluetooth antenna, which is ITP, that you want to do. I think that's pretty flexible. It gives us a lot of options there. Next is zone inclusion. So when you're playing from an ITP or Bluetooth to an ITP, it stands to reason that you might want to play in multiple zones at a time. So this is kind of what we did. So I can say when this happens, I can play in one zone, which is default, or I can play in a bunch of zones. So whenever I'm using the Bluetooth, it'll turn on. In this case, it'll turn on just the office. But if I had deck and kitchen turned on, it'll turn on all of those at the same time. Kind of a different or a new way to do grouping specific to Bluetooth. All right, it's a lot of information. Let's take a break. And Jeff, if you want to get the questions going.
Yeah. So we've got a couple that came through directly, other than through the chat. Guys, go ahead and type all the questions that you have in the chat log. But a couple that came through. So Bluetooth radio. So when we're talking extender players, Larry, how many are the max supported? So what's the full expandability of this with unique players?
Good question. No, this is actually in the integration note for the internal player that's been updated, and it'll be posted when the release goes out. It's for those on the beta, it's there too. It is 16 for SC300, and it's 4 for an SC100 unlicensed. So it goes up to 16 if you get a license, the pro license.
So guys, it adheres to our standard master extender relationship, right? We can always have 16 if a 300 or an SC10 was a master back in the day, and then if it was a G1, we're capped at 4. SC100 non-licensed, capped at 4. Next question we got: if you currently have Bluetooth streaming, what happens if a call comes through on the phone that's currently paired to the touch panel?
So if a phone call comes in, that obviously you'll take the call, and the stream will pause, so that it won't play your voice over the over the speakers. That's for sure. I think that was the gist of the question.
Other one came in. So what is the range for Bluetooth? I mean, I can say from personal experience how my house is laid out. I can hit all 3 touch panels in range pretty much no matter where I'm at. So I'd say, what do you say, Larry? Maybe 30 feet?
Yeah, I think it based a lot on the home construction, obviously, like if anything. But yeah, I think 30, 40 feet, and it really depends. But yeah, in the ITP, it's actually exterior, so it's not like buried in the box, and it's pretty good here, anyways. We've tested it in a bunch of spots and during beta as well.
And then we've got, can you control Bluetooth volume from phone directly or ITP only? It's a very good question.
It is a good question, yes.
It's something that
I don't want to tip the hat too much, but it's something that we've, of course, we've looked at, and it gets complex when you do that and you have multiple zones. Like, how does that work? Does it control so it gets really complex for things. But yeah, that's something we're absolutely looking at.
Yeah. Well, I think the question was more or less, if I've got it casting or Bluetooth from my iPhone and I hit the volume up and down on the side of the phone, right, will the volume go up and down?
So today,
and it actually does.
But yeah, because it gets really complex. So there's a whole bunch of things we have to do to make that. It really is something we are looking at, though.
All right. Does this work if the ITP is wirelessly connected? I am saying that if we're using this for a Bluetooth endpoint, you make sure that the ITP is wired.
It is not supported. That's noted. But yeah, the ITP must be hardwired. We're sending a lot of data over that, and if it's wireless, it's just not. It's gonna drop packets, and for audio, you just can't do that. So it must be hardwired.
And then we've got one more we'll do before we move on. It has nothing to do with the current thing, but it came up a couple times in the chat. RS-45 for the April Air. Yes, we do have a solution with that using the protocol adapter, in this new 8.7 release. You are going to need to use the 485 to 232 protocol adapter from April Air. You can now assign the RS-485 bus COM device to a 232 port instead of 485.
Right. You gotta use the official April Air 45 to 232 adapter, and then that will work.
All right. I'll try my best to, and Jeremy too, feel free to chime in on the chat answering some of these. Let's, for sake of time, let's keep rolling through here.
Next, we're going to talk about HHR direct communication mode. So what this is the, in history, in the way that's always worked before this, is that as an HHR had to be connected to the residence or location's Wi-Fi, and then that information would get passed to the controller, and that's how they would communicate, right? So Wi-Fi to the controller, back and forth, which was fine. But there's some times where you just don't, where you don't want that. You don't want to own the Wi-Fi, or the controller's right there. So it's kind of going the long way, especially if master bedrooms. Sometimes I've seen this. They're in the very corner of the house where Wi-Fi is not the best and things like that. So what we have is in the ability to have one HHR connect directly to a controller, an SC100 or 300 via Wi-Fi. So you guys know that the SC100 and 300 have Wi-Fi built in, but we're repurposing that Wi-Fi instead of for communications, STA mode. It's now we use it for AP mode, so we can talk directly to a controller. And again, distance is definitely an issue, or you just got to be aware of it. So it works with a hardwired SC100 and 300 only. So if you are using the Wi-Fi STA mode of an SC100 or 300, then you can't use the Wi-Fi in AP mode. So it must be hardwired. Only one HHR remote can be used in direct mode per controller. So if you have one master controller in your system, you can connect one HHR directly to it. But extenders are supported. So if you have multiple extenders, maybe they're in the locations, maybe you have an extender hardwired in the master bedroom, then you can use that as a direct mode of communication. So in that case, the HHR would talk directly to the controller that's in that room. The mixed mode is supported, so one HHR might be direct, and now it's the one that's just closest to the controller, and the other ones would certainly be regular Wi-Fi. All the remotes are supported since they talk the same exact way, HR2s, HR200s, HR10s, HR30s. And so, again, range, got to be cognizant of it. The HR2s and 200 are, for me, they're noticeably shorter than the HR10s and 30s. Just probably old versus new hardware. Keep that in mind. If you're connecting to an SC300, always got to connect that antenna on the back. It's a drastically different range without the antenna. Trust me. And like all things Wi-Fi, the construction of the home totally makes a difference in going through walls and ceilings and things like that. So always worth a check, but the range is typically, again, similar to Bluetooth. It's about 30 feet for a good connection. So take a look at that, how to set this up. So there is a new option if you go into the setup. Well, the first thing you have to do is actually turn on AP mode. That is new. So that's where you would normally set up the static IP address. You go over to Wi-Fi, you click Enable Wi-Fi, and you drop that box down, and you select AP mode. And that's what you want. STA mode is using Wi-Fi for main communication, which you do not want. So you hit OK, you set that up, you hit OK, the controller will reboot. That is totally normal and expected. Also note that the alarm thermostats for Discovery needs to be on STA mode. So make sure you do any of that beforehand, because once it's in AP mode, you cannot discover any alarm thermostats. All right, so after that's all set up, you plug in your remote like you would normally do and go into the communication device for the HHRs, and then connect to the connected HHR. In that menu, there's now a new option, AP type. Default is the standard way, and there was no option for that. That's just how they worked. Now there's an option to connect to the controller or connect to an extender. Select the one that is appropriate and it will download. Now, if you're using an extender, the extenders have a very limited options in their configuration. So you would set configure the attached HHR in a different spot than normal because that spot is grayed out in an extender. You would go to where you actually set the AP mode, and there's that new button down there, configure attached HHR, which would pop up that box and allow you to select extender mode for AP for communication. So just a little, again, graphics, I think picture worth 1,000 words. This is kind of like a project you might use, the extender or two extenders and a master controller. You have a living room close to the master. You would use that. And you might have an extender. And remember, you might use these for maybe another audio player, and a LAN internal player. Maybe you're using IR or 232, maybe OSD. So you can use these things, these extenders for multiple things. And if there's one that's close for these different areas, you can also use it for direct HHR communication, which is convenient. All right, Jeffrey.
Jeremy's been doing a good job answering these questions that come in, but a couple we can discuss real quick with a group before we roll in. The HHR direct mode, guys, it's a one-to-one communication here. So people are asking if I have, one extender, one master, can I assign multiple remotes to that specific AP node? And it is a one-to-one connection on that. And unfortunately, the HHA direct mode is not available on the older controllers. So this feature here is ST100, ST300 only. Questions are coming in, will it work on a G1, ST2, ST10? And that is not the case. And guys, this is a huge feature. Traditionally we've been losing a lot of this business to our competitors because they're doing this via means of Zigbee, RF, what have you. And the dealer base has been generally hesitant to go in if they're only doing a small single room solution because they have to own the network or they have to put the remotes on the network, and thereby kind of owning that network. There's a problem with the ISP modem router combo. With the Wi-Fi, of course, the remote doesn't work, and then you guys get those phone calls. So there's always been a little hesitation selling our single room solution like this. And now, it's a segue for this. It's priced right with our competitors. It's a little bit better form of communication, being this is ad hoc Wi-Fi instead of RF or Zigbee. So this really opens up the book to a lot of the smaller deployments that we normally wouldn't have a chance to get into with our traditional equipment. Larry, why don't we keep it rolling through? Jeremy's doing a good job on the questions here.
All right, so now we're going to talk about the new subsystem utilities. It's been in the works for a bit, totally new. And again, there hasn't been a new subsystem since Intercom. Oh, geez, was that back in 2018? God, I remember that door at Cedia. All right, so what utilities is a new home for different device categories, right? So we had nowhere for power, we had nowhere for water devices, or even a driver for water devices, indoor air quality, and energy management. So that is what the 4 device categories are at launch, and of course, there's more stuff planned in the future. So let's take a look. If you click on the utilities subtab, you get the list of your devices. So they all have a special icon. So a power device has that icon, indoor air quality, you can see water, and you can see the ones that are yellow and one is indicated in red. So we point out the ones that have an issue that require or should require some attention. So, and we don't call out ones that don't require attention. So let's take a look at that real quick. So in this overview, there's that one that is yellow. So that yellow means that it is in a fair condition. And why is it in a fair condition? So that we post right there, it's fair condition, and its VOCs are high. So it's just kind of a way to indicate something to the end user. Actually, I find that pretty useful. And red as well. So red, remember, there's a couple thresholds, and we'll cover this. But if something is basically something could be 3 conditions: good, fair, or poor. And red would indicate poor. So if it's a poor condition, just indicating that So you should probably take a look at this, and that will indicate that with a red line and also show you what why it's showing as that. So this one happened to be temperature. Now we'll take a look at the dashboard. So this is the dashboard, and on the dashboard for a device, we'll put all the if it has controls, we'll put those on the right, and we'll put the information to the left. And here you can see the gauges. So these are brand new. We haven't done gauges before, and this is them. There's 3 different kinds. Default, which is green to the left, fair in the middle, and red to the right. Inverted, which is the opposite of that. Red to the left, yellow, then green, and middle out. Well, what can I say? We like Silicon Valley. Middle out is green in the middle and red, yellow, fair, poor on both sides. And you can see why voltage could be not good if it's too low or too high, right? So those are the 3 gauge types. And different devices will use different gauge types, right? So then the controls off to the right are the controls for the device. We'll get into this in a little more detail, and because they're a little different based on the type of device it is. But for this, obviously this is a power device. This is an M4315, and I could turn the outlet on or off, or I can reboot it by hitting that reboot button. Banks are a little differently because they're multiple devices, but we give you the outlet numbers for each one of those. So that's handy, and also tells you if it's on the front or the back, which is handy. And there's this little lock symbol. So because this stuff could be sensitive, right? I mean, you don't want the end user or anybody to just reboot certain devices, so you can lock them, right? So you can lock the device, and when you do that, it requires not only a PIN code, but it requires the user to be set up to be able to do that. It's just similar to what we did for surveillance in privacy modes. Same thing. So each user would have an option for utilities advanced control, and if they are checked off to do that, then they can use their code and they'd have to enter their code to be able to power cycle or turn on or off an outlet. Pretty handy. Now there's options. So what we do, or what the driver gives us, is we think it's pretty good. That we try to hit the 80% with it, but there is some options. So that's show in history and show on the dashboard. So you can show or hide different things based on you or your client's needs. And then there's usage. So this will give us consumption. Now this isn't for every device, because indoor air quality, there is no consumption, right? So that's why this specifically, we're looking at a water device, which there is consumption. So there's a couple things. This is hourly consumption. You can see at 4 a.m., I'm not using much water. Maybe at 3 a.m. I got up, and at 8 I took a shower. So you can kind of see by the hourly usage of how that looks. Then we can filter that by daily as well. So daily water. Now you can see there's also a yellow and a red here too, that will indicate a fair or poor, and we'll talk about that. That's a threshold, and we'll talk about that in a few. But yeah, this is the way that we can see how much water we used by day. And then we could also do weekly. So weekly water, so you can see my average water. What I'm using this week with the caret all the way to the right is the week I'm currently in. And again, I have a fair or poor here too, and you can I don't know why that week was way over. And monthly, so I can actually compare different values per month. And actually, I learned a lot just by having this kind of thing and doing water and knowing how much I've used or not used. So it's kind of cool. And those are the filters. There's one more though. There's yearly. Now, only 2 devices currently support this. That's Fin and the Energy Detective. The other ones do not. So it's very specific because you have to be able to. They have to be able to support the calls to be able to show the yearly. All right, now let's talk about history. So history for utilities is different than history that we've ever done. History for climate and history for everything else, you can show one device, and you could have the lines mix and match in between with the different values. So heat, cool, still the same range, right? But the ranges are much different for every sensor data in utilities, right? So what we have on the top is we'll list all the bands, all the data. So CO2, this is indoor air quality. So CO2, PMs. Remember, those ranges are totally different between the two. They're not, you can't draw them on the same. So on the top, we always have the most left, in this case CO2, show first, and then you can click on one of those and it'll draw the PM2, it'll give you radon or VOCs, whatever you want, just you have to press it, right? So that's why they're a little bit thicker, so you can press them easier. Then we will print the data underneath. And you can see the yellow line is where the threshold for fair is. You can see I went way above that at that particular time. And the red will also show you where your red threshold is for your poor condition. So you can see I was kind of dipping in the poor there. All right, so that is the history. And then we filter by device. So if, you can have a lot of devices, and it'd be nice if you could filter them. So we do that. We offer that right there. If you want to filter by the device type, you can. And if you want to make a separate page using your user tabs, you can do that. So if I wanted to, instead of having one utilities for all the devices, if you wanted, one for power, one for indoor air quality, one for water, you can do that. You can set these up in our typical way. You have 5 user tabs now to use. You can totally do that. So, and that'll filter them out, and then take that away from the utility subtab. All right, so now we're getting into thresholds. Now the thresholds we load in the drivers that we had made so far, we have predefined the thresholds based on the device and what they tell us is their normal usage. But we have an area, and it's in the settings, advanced settings, that this can be modified by the end user. So in water, for example, my water pressure here runs very low, and it changes by the season. So I have to be able to, and the end user would have to be able to change that if they needed to, and you wouldn't want to call every time to do that. So we have high and low, and some have high and low if it's the middle out, that you can set your thresholds a little bit that makes sense for the residents that this is in. There's also a reset to default. So if you play with it a lot, or somebody had changed something unknowingly, you can always go back to the way that the driver says. Daily usage. So on that page where we showed how much consumption I had for water by the week, by the day, by the month, that is also here as well. So that threshold that paints that yellow line or that red line is located in the same sections at the very top of that page. So we tend to predefine these as much as we can. Like a device doesn't say how much water should you use, but what we did is we just estimated an average household of 4 people. Then that's what we did. So, and that could be changed, and likely probably should, but some that we can't, like power, for instance, we can't estimate how much power because it depends what's plugged into it. There is no predefined default, so it is 0. So you have to enter that in if you want to get those yellow or red lights, or maybe you just don't want that at all, and that's a 0. So that's okay too. All right, so event maps. There's event maps, and there's 2 specific spots under utilities. You'll get event maps for the state, for the state of the device. So if this is in fair condition or poor condition, do something. Maybe send a notification. You can also trigger your outlets by event map, or any, if you had there's no control for indoor air quality, but if you had water, you can control that valve via event map, and that's in the utilities section. Now, if you wanted to do something based on the individual threshold data, you can as well. Now that's under inputs, not utilities. It gets too confusing with all that stuff in there. So under inputs, because it's an input, you can say, I specifically looked at battery because I want to know when my batteries are low. So I can say state poor, send me a notification, change your batteries, right? Or you can do something specific if the CO2 is high, blink the lights, or do something, or just, again, send a notification to my phone. That's perfect. So, or on the touchscreen itself. So you can do that based on the individual threshold data. Licenses. So this is a new subsystem, and as such, it has some licenses. On the SC100, we limit this to 3 third-party devices by default. If you want more, you can just unlock it with a pro license. But what we consider, we do not consider Panamax, Furman, and Luxel as third party, so those don't count towards that that license, that 3 things. All right, so now we'll talk I'll talk quickly about the individual subsystems. So it's actually like subsystems, right? So power, there's some data there. Now, as we go forward and more devices are added, some things might change, but basically we'll show you what the device has to offer. You can see here. Control, so again, outlet or port, if it's PoE, or banks. Power link. So if you have a power device, we now have a power link dropdown in the configurator. So most devices have this. There's a couple caveats, of course, but some devices, you can now link them to a, so we know that this, in this case, the ITP is on this specific port, or whatever that happens to be. And what that'll do is that'll fill in the name for you, and there's stuff that it's also planned to do in the future. There's the usage for the power, and then what drivers are out right now in 8.7 is the Panamax, obviously, Furman, and Luxel. Now, just to note, Panamax and Furman are controlled locally, not through the Blue Bolt cloud. All right, so now we'll talk about water. Again, these are the device specific.
Larry,
yes.
Can I interrupt you?
Absolutely.
So, back on the whole power thing, it's always been kind of the elephant in the room that we never wanted to discuss was our old integration with Panamax as far as control of outlets and whatnot. It was a bit janky, not very intuitive. Everything that we're seeing here on the COM device now our Panamax pieces and our compatible devices, it auto discovers. So it's getting the integration that you would expect for being in a parent company. Elan and Panamax are by the same manufacturer. Now we have that little level of integration where we can hit discover devices, and it will crawl and it will populate with your Panamax pieces that are connected to the internet. So it's a much more streamlined integration. I don't know if you were going to touch on that in a little bit, Larry, but I thought that was
that's definitely relevant and definitely important. Thank you, Jeffrey. All right, so we'll just keep this moving. That's the data. We're going to review this later, so we'll post it so you can look at the data. If you have water, you can control the valve. Again, you can lock it. Water has usage, and we have fin and flow off the bat for drivers for that category. Indoor air quality, that's the data it'll give you. Now, that depends on the actual, because they have a bunch of different sensors. Some have radon, some don't. So it depends on which one that is, and that's by Airthings. And energy. So we didn't really touch on this much, but the energy detective is what we have off the bat, and that's the data it gives us. That does give us usage data, which is nice. So let's take a break here and let's ask some questions.
Yeah, there's a bunch of questions that came in. Guys, a lot of questions about other, third-party products, especially networking switches that we haven't touched on. With utilities being a new subsystem, a new category into Elan, it is going to be part of our API for the third-party developers. So, what we do in-house at the launch here, obviously, was stuff that we're partnered with on our portal, and we picked select manufacturers right out of the gate. Once utilities is live for third-party, sky's really the limit. So I wouldn't be surprised if something is written for Unify, if something is written for Wattbox, but I don't want you guys to think that we're capped on only what we're showing here. Yeah. This is the beginning of something much larger.
Yes. I'll also touch on that. So to get that, we have to finish utilities before we spin it to the API, and then third-party guys can have access to it. So that now that we're launching it, that's the next part, is to get that into the API, and then once we do, it'll go live. But that is the plan. So we can, and then the devices will be a ton. So that is the plan.
All right. So we've got, can we link network PoE switches into utilities? And yes, we do with, again, right out of the gate, this is going to be Luxel. So it will, again, using the Discover feature, it will populate with your Luxel devices, and you will be able to power cycle ports that are calling for PoE.
It is not data,
well
just the power.
Correct. As well as get, forgot where I was going with that because you interrupted me. So yes, Luxel right out of the gate is what we're doing with PoE and individual port management.
Somebody asked about power usage alerts. Now, not at this time, but that will be maybe a phase 2, phase 3. That's we'll add that to the event mapper so you can do stuff based off of status or consumption data or usage data. So yeah, not at this time, but definitely there's a bunch of different buckets and phases that we're going to do for this, and that's already been planned for future.
Yeah, and there was one more. A couple came through as far as the picture we showed of the 4315 was coming in as outlet 1, outlet 2, outlet 3. Guys, this is a local integration, so we are not integrating with the Bluebolt cloud. We're integrating with the device itself. So while it will pull up with our generic pre-default names for the outlets, outlet 1, 2, what have you, you do have the ability to go in there and change them, obviously label them to whatever they're at. But it's important to note this is local integration. We're not going out to the cloud, or we're not going out and back in. This is point-to-point local integration with what we're showing here.
Right. And the name, so we define them basically out of the box as outlet 1, 2, 3, like Jeff had said, but you can absolutely name them like you can with anything else with a display name if you want to, or if you use the power link, that will take the name automatically and place it there. So you can do that, and then that'll be better for the future, as well as populate the name for you.
All right, let's keep rolling.
All right, let's go. So those are the 3 big features, and they're quite big. So like always, we add some more themes. That's a very popular thing. Everybody likes the themes. There's a couple of them. This one is Aurora. It's a live theme, as you can see. It's a little slow via the Wi-Fi or the internet, but it is a cool theme. Firefly, this one as well. This is new. This is the live theme. They're all live themes. Smoke. Water. And plasma. So that's a total of 5 new live themes for this build. Next is some update to platform security, right? So any local access viewer now requires a authorization to be okay to connect. So you can't just go into a house, connect locally, and get on. You have to actually be okay to do that, or get approval to do that. And the approval can happen one of 2 ways. It can happen in the configurator, so register device, or what would happen is there's a new notification in the viewer. So if you had an ITP in there and someone connected, guest came in with their phone and they try to connect, this will pop up. It won't show all the time. It'll pop up with a little red indicator and say, oh, do you want to let this guy on? And you can say yes or no. So that is new security for the platform. Extenders now require a password, and what they'll do is, since the master has a password, it'll use the master password and it will force it. So, but when you do an update, it'll just knows what the password for the master is and just applies that to the extender. So it's a very easy update, as you would expect.
Let me interrupt you again. I mean, that interface registration is huge, right? We've always been able to, even on takeover systems, sometimes we have problems where people will just go and they can log on because they're on the local network. So it's any other currently enrolled device will be able to do that, right? So it's not something where you need to be on site. And think of like vacation properties, rental properties, right? A new tenant comes in, or an Airbnb, If someone comes in, logs onto the network, the homeowner or the property manager gets that notification. Do we want to approve? Do we want to unapprove the device? So it's just another level of security as far as the interface is concerned.
Thank you, Jeffrey. So there's been an update to the security interface. You can see there. Personally, I really like that countdown clock. Since we did all that work on the gauges, we kind of used it for that as well, and it just kind of spins down to 0. I really like it, and yeah, it's a little better of a UI. Definitely much needed. 2 gig integration with the Edge panel, and also intercom update. This one's been big. So this is using the platform native calling. So when your doorbell rings, it will call your phone like a phone call rather than through the app. So your phone will ring just like it normally would. And this is on iOS as well as Android. Android does require Android-specific setup, where iOS just kind of works. But they all have pluses and minuses, right? Outbound calling, so from your phone to the door station or intercom device via this native, is not supported, but you can call the normal way inside the Elan app. You can call and it'll go through, but not the native way. The native is only one way in, so it'll come in. You can answer it just like you answer a phone call. It's pretty cool, and it works well. This does require updates to the apps, so just be sure that you do that, or it won't work. Next is there's a push to talk function. So this is for the door station. If you want to use push to talk because you have a lot of high wind or excessive noise outside, you can do that as well. So you have to push, you could say something and let it go. And that might be good if you have, again, a lot of people inside, and maybe it's an office or something, and you don't want anybody just to connect both ways. You want to actually press a button and then talk, so that you can do that now. And there's been some updates to surveillance, so you can see how long ago this was. That is that handsome guy with that snowblower is me, and that's my driveway. The timeline there is a little bit better. Kind of goes along with our history now. It all kind of flows together. It's the same. So updated timeline on the mobile devices, the event list in the portrait mode, that's been updated, and I find this much better. You could do timeline or events, and they'll post little icon of color with what the event was and different things like that. Same driveway. And then update to the lighting area improvement for portrait on your phone. So the way it is now, it'll just show the very top bar for the room, and then you can expand it and do other things past that. I think it's much better, easier to use. Climate scheduler. There's a new option in global climate options, schedule in main UI. So that's putting the scheduler back into the main UI. If you want that, that's where the option is.
Let me interrupt you here.
No, I think
that was on this. So we made that change to hide it and nest it into the settings in the viewer, and we got instantly probably dozens of calls from dealers. While it's easy to train someone with a new Elan system where it's at, people that were used to accessing that for years, and then all of a sudden we rooted it and moved it someplace else. So this is key. Now we have the option to nest it back where it was for your older clients, or your clients that have older systems that they're used to that method of navigation. That was a sticking point with me. Go ahead, Larry.
I recall. So all the history, the whole surveillance timeline, everything kind of uses that now for the history timeline. You can see how it's very similar to that. Everything's kind of has to flow, and you can't have it be different. So it is not. So all those history tabs are updated, and same with utilities. It uses the same thing. So we also did we corrected the HC config backup so that you can take a backup from a HC controller and go right to an SC100 or 300, and no more intermediate step necessary. So it's all good now. That works, which is pretty good timing. All right, let's pause there for some questions.
A couple things on the native calling. Maybe people are asking if a native calling from the intercom, do we have the availability to flip that to like a FaceTime video and audio call, or is it only audio, Larry?
Good question. So it comes in The phone call comes in, you answer it, and it'd be a phone call, audio only as you would expect. Now, I can't back up here, but there's a button that will show you that you hit that, and it'll go launch into the app, which will launch into the native phone. So you have to do that's an action that's required. So you can pick it up, answer it, and you just talk to the person. Or if you hit that button that's on the screen, it'll then launch the app and get you into two-way voice or two-way video.
Yeah, we've overlaid, when you got the incoming call on your architecture. I think it's normally on iOS, like where the contacts button would be nested on an active call. Now I think it says Elan 8, and that will do a redirect and launch right into the video audio into Elan.
Good question.
We had another one. Has the doorbell been updated to show thumbnails with notifications? And Larry, I know that with this new native call features, it gives us a little bit more stuff moving forward. Do you want to touch on that?
Yeah, so we needed to, so that basically how you saw it in the slide is how it'll work. So we'll show you the thumb of whatever's going on, or a still shot of it anyways.
I think Jeremy's doing a good job. They ask about 2 gig edge. Yes, the 2 gig edge integration that is live in this build. It's another good question. Gate call. So if we've got an architecture, traditionally if we have an incoming call from a door station up at the gate, then we'd have the option to host a couple buttons there for actions to trigger the gate or whatnot. So with the native calling, again, similar with video, you would have to hit the Elan 8 to launch into the Elan app, and then it would go right to that page nested with your buttons, and that's where you would access the relay for the contact closure to open the gate on that. It's not going to be an option natively on the native call.
Correct. Good question. All right. Any others, Jeffrey?
No, I think we're good.
All right. Yeah, this is a lot of information. I try to chew it down as fast as possible, but it's a lot. I know we're getting that to the top of the hour, but only a few more slides left. So internal drivers that have been updated. There's the Leap driver that's been updated. So what we did here is if there is more than X amount of commands, they would kind of just fail off. So if I was executing a scene with 20 Lutron Leap devices, they would never get through all of them. So we've done a specific thing, worked with them directly on how to make that happen. So that's been improved, and that's good now. We also added direct keypad button support. So if you wanted to press a button and play some music, you can do that now, event map it, and that works now in this build. I think that's a big one. Been updated to KNX to support RGBW. 2 gig edge support, so that is in this build. You also make sure you have to get the edge update as well. That firmware must be whatever they updated to before our beta. I forget the number. LG projectors, so that's a new driver for them, for all their stuff. Samsung TV, that's an update. Now remember, that update is different than some of the other ones. That specific update, and that goes along with a lot of the displays, you have to go into the display driver and click Update Driver to get the update. So you can always look at the version number because it'll tell you what it is, and the new version number is 1.1.7. So if you're younger than that, you should press it and get that update. So we added the first screen control as well as multi-view control. Spent some fixes for the frame TV as far as that works, and the ability to set the TV channel favorites to the internal tuner. So if you're outside of the U.S. and can't get access to the TV media favorites, you can use this now. Same thing with the TV media favorites for LG. We added that there, but we also added their quick launch feature. Again, that driver, you must go into it and hit update. Sony, obviously we did the same thing there. We added those channel favorites, but again, you must hit the update driver button. We also added the new Denon Marantz drivers for 2022. You can see a list there. The utilities drivers were all new, and that was all built for that whole subsystem. So we did Panamax and Furman local control. You could see, you could check out the integration note, but that is they'll support all CB1, CB2s, most devices. Luxol PoE. So again, we touched on this, but briefly, this will take the boxes that are supported, and it will turn on or off the PoE portion, not the data. But again, if it's PoE, the device won't be powered on anyway. So there is that. But it won't. If you have a non-PoE device, it's not going to shut off power to it. It'll recognize that PoE is being used and won't give you an option if it's not. So flow by Moen. So that's a picture of the flow device. And that's a main water cutoff. Fin, that is again a water device, and that is a main unit cutoff. Air things, and they have a bunch of different indoor air quality devices, and we support all of them. So that is the View Plus that you see there, but they have a bunch of other ones. Some look like smoke detectors, and some have different sensors, all kinds of stuff. And the energy detective, so that's the energy detective there that talks locally. So we do that one, and yeah, so that is the drivers for utilities. And then there is third-party drivers. Again, these get updated, maybe a couple of times a month. But we have over 370 drivers now, and it's growing every week. But check out Marketplaces, is where they're all hosted, and all the details for them are hosted there as well. That's in Management Cloud. All right, so here's a couple things we need to talk about. One is Alexa on the ITP. So that will function normally, but it's the music portion. So before you can say, play this or play that, but that is not going to work. And that will be restored in a future version. So they changed something with the certification. We have to do some work to get that recertified. So, but the Alexa skill stuff will still operate as it did. The old HL DVR feature, the built-in DVR, that is gone. It's not there anymore. It was replaced by the NVR, so that is just not there anymore. Just know that. And again, this keeps coming up. 8.5.2 was the last supported release for the TS panels. Again, if you have TS2s, you should probably think, and you want to update, you should probably think about updating some of those older panels as they age. Here's the CERs that were addressed in this. And let's take a quick pause there. Jeffrey?
Yeah, I think Jeremy's been doing a good job on everything that's come through. I think we can keep rolling.
All right, sounds good. Well, we're pretty much at the end. We ran 5 minutes over, but here's the new updated app structure. This one has utilities built in there, so that's why it's updated, but you guys should know, again, all the documents you should take a look at, the What's New guide, the release notes, and all the integration notes, and I actually printed them out so you can see them. Remember, if you're updating to 8.7, which right now it's looking like next week, you must update all the viewers. That's the phones, the mobile devices, as well as PC and Mac viewers. You got to update them all, or some things will not work correctly. All right. Well, we're only went 5 minutes over. I'm surprised. But if there's any remaining questions, let's get them in.
Yeah, I think we're good on questions, and let's come through while I'm talking here. Guys, there's going to be a ton of collateral with this release on the Management Cloud. I'm going to get all the integration notes for everything we talked about. There's also going to be short 2 to 5 minute videos going in a deep dive of actually integrating with everything that we saw to this webinar. It goes over the HHR Direct, goes over the utility, adding specific things, setting specific things up. So look for that to come. That'll probably follow in the week after the release. Reach out to your RTS. All the RTSs are up to date with the beta and experts to answer all your questions, as well as the sales teams are somewhat up to speed on everything. And that's really it. Thanks for joining us and spending some time with us. Larry, you got any?
Thanks, guys. I really appreciate it. Again, we'll get the recording. We'll get it up. We'll do another one of these in a few days. I believe it's Thursday. I could be wrong. Maybe it's Wednesday. But thanks for the time. And again, next week, look out. Reach out to your RTS for support.
Thursday, Larry.
Thanks,
Thursday.
Jeffrey.
Yeah.
All right, guys. Have a good one. Appreciate it. Bye.
Thanks, guys.